Hey, Frazai? Xander asked hesitantly. Yes? What's a great Lauravian panther? And why does the goddess— Are you telling me you just got a quest to rescue that massive panther over there? Frazai pointed to the horse size. Yeah, I'm on board with it. For really, I was expecting more resistance from you guys. Atrax shrugged, and Graphus added, I've never met a menagerie caravan owner who wasn't unpleasant, so I have no complaints about a divine task to free an animal that clearly doesn't belong here. Do you think I can just buy it? I mean, how many people actually want a giant feline predator? That thing looks like it could bite me in half without even trying. Xander pondered the best way to go about this. As much as he disliked the caravan, he didn't want to outright steal the panther either. I imagine there's still a market for something like that if they can find some skilled tamers, Atrax said. That's fair, I suppose. Well, can't hurt to try. Xander handed his horse's reins to Atrax, dismounted, and walked up to one of the merchants near the panther's cage. I want to buy that one, he said simply, pointing at the Lauravian panther. The animal was pressed against the back of its enclosure, panting, as a crowd of onlookers admired its exotic beauty. The merchant looked dumbfounded that someone in this village would want such an animal. You want to buy the Lauravian panther? Yes. You're sure? The man wasn't processing this very well. Yes. You do know those things are dangerous, right? I'm confident in my ability to handle it. Just tell me the price already. Xander was quickly growing annoyed with the merchant's odd reluctance to sell him the cat. Okay. You don't look like the usual tamer type, but if you say you know what you're doing, then you must know what you're doing. Asking price is 100 gold pieces. These cats are rare, and as soon as word gets out that we have one, buyers in the capital will be lining up. Xander didn't have 100 gold. After his payment from the guild and his time working for Smith, he had maybe 3/4 of that amount. I'll give you 50 gold, and I'll enchant the bars on your carts to be stronger. The merchant looked thoughtful. Xander knew that rune work like that was highly valuable, so it was already a tempting deal. Greed won out. 60 in the rune work. 50. And you can have my horse, too. Deal. Xander was surprised at how easily the deal was made. Either rune work was more valuable than he had thought, or the merchant believed he was offloading an unwanted burden. Either way, Xander was the real winner here. The rune work would be easy, if a bit tedious, and the risk of the panther being an undesirable purchase was negated by the fact that the goddess of cats— Xander was still questioning why there was an actual goddess of cats— had personally given him this task. The moment he shook hands with the merchant to seal the deal, he felt an update in his status sheet. After handing over the gold and leading his horse to the merchant, he opened his status. Quest task successfully completed. Reward from Hetra. Dispensing Xander felt a presence at his side, though no one else seemed to notice anything unusual. In his mind, he heard, The Lauravian panther above all others carries my favor. While I might have preferred my wrath to be visited upon those responsible, you have indeed fulfilled the task I set before you. Go now with this blessing. You have been granted the title. Cat touched, cat touched. You may form a bond with one feline creature which lasts until either the caster or the bonded feline dies. Cooldown, 30 days. Mana cost, high. Duration, until death. Xander knew his next obvious step. The merchant pulled a key from his belt and handed it to Xander, clearly wanting nothing to do with getting close to the beast. Xander took the key and made his way through the crowd, earning a few disapproving glares as his armored form bumped slightly against some of the villagers. Staring at the huge feline, he really hoped this ability would work. He cast his newly granted cat-touched ability upon the Lauravian panther. Immediately, he became aware of the cat's presence and its position relative to him. He could feel that the poor thing was cramped, bored, and stressed. The panther had snapped its head around to stare at him the moment he finished casting the ability. It was clearly aware of Xander as well. He wondered if it could sense as much about him as he could about it. Cautiously stepping closer to the bars, he held his hand up near enough for it to sniff. A few gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd as he reached up toward the cat. The panther sniffed him, then let out a deep chuff, rubbing its head against his hand. Xander had heard a tiger chuff in videos back when he still had an internet connection, but this sound was far, far deeper. He had the sneaking suspicion that if this thing decided to roar at full volume, it could easily scatter the crowd and damage eardrums. He could feel hope rising through the bond. He wondered if the panther could sense his intent to free it, or if this was simply the first time it had been shown any kind of compassion. "All right, buddy. Let's get you out of here, but first I need you to promise you won't hurt any of these people. Can you let me know somehow?" The panther, surprisingly, gave a small nod. Xander wasn't sure if the animal was naturally that intelligent, and the bond merely allowed him to communicate with it, or if the bond had enhanced its intelligence to the point of understanding his instructions. He didn't know much about this world's creatures, but the second option seemed more likely. He could see that there was something more behind the panther's eyes than there had been before, and it made sense that a skill bestowed by a goddess would be powerful enough to affect an animal in such a way. Xander slowly put the lock in the key and turned it. There were more gasps and even a few shouts as the crowd noticed that he had begun unlocking the large door set into the bars. The crowd quickly began to disperse as people decided that they had much better and safer places to be than in front of a cart that was about to release a giant, predatory cat, leaving only a few braver observers hovering nearby. As soon as he had finished unlocking the gate, the panther pressed a portion of its weight against the door, popping it open in its entirety. Gracefully, it slunk through the doorway and hopped the short distance to the ground, where it stood next to Xander, sniffing him inquisitively, and gave his armored shoulder a slight but very rough lick. Xander could hear the cat's tongue scrape against the steel of his armor. The cat was hunched in on itself slightly, and Xander could tell it was uncomfortable with so many eyes upon it. It would have to get more used to that, Xander thought, considering that it would likely draw stares wherever they went. "What are we going to call you, huh?" Xander pondered aloud, considering his newfound companion animal. "I don't even know if you're a male or a female. Say, are you a male?" The panther gave a quick shake of its head. "So female, then. What's a good name for a giant female panther, huh? You got any ideas?" The panther tilted its head slightly as if it were thinking but offered no answer. "How about, Freya? Sounds nice. It's an older style of naming an old god from my own world, which seems fitting considering your divine providence." The panther seemed to consider for a moment before giving a nod, and Xander could feel that the animal was pleased to know it had a name. "Now, let's get you out of this town before they start bringing out the pitchforks or something. Just gotta hand over the payment and get these bars sorted." The villagers were still apprehensive of the pair, seemingly expecting the giant cat to go wild at any moment and begin attacking people. Xander made his way to the merchant, who was half hiding behind the wagon. Freya had followed him at a sedate pace, and the man was clearly uncomfortable to see the animal looming behind Xander. Xander could tell Freya deeply disliked her former captor and turned to the cat. "Be nice, Freya." The panther changed her demeanor in absolutely no way, befitting a cat's understanding of behaving. But the admonition mollified the merchant somewhat. Xander counted out 50 gold worth of coins, having to resort to silver for some of it. "Right then, let me get started on the bars, and Freya and I will be on our way." "You want to meet your new friends first?" he asked the cat, struggling not to resort to baby-talking it, considering that it was at least somewhat intelligent. The panther cocked its head again at the new word, and Xander felt its interest peak at the question. Xander made his way over to Atrax, Phrase, and Graphus, with Freya padding softly behind him. The two horses were clearly wary of the new beast, but settled quickly as it made no quick or threatening movements. Phrase's stag, however, looked like it would drop dead if it were not held by its own bond. Phrase was doing her best to soothe it, murmuring calming words to it and stroking its neck. "Well, meet Freya. Freya, meet Atrax, Graphus, and Phrase. Please be nice to them, and their horses and deer." Xander added the last bit quickly, seeing the panther's eyes drawn to the fidgety stag. "She's real smart, it seems like. I have to engrave the bars on these carts as part of my payment for her, but I'll make it as quick as I can. Would you mind staying with her while I do that? I have a feeling that a lot of the animals would get riled up having her in front of their cage. Freya, please wait here while I get this over with." The panther let out what could only be interpreted as a rather bored sigh and made itself comfortable by laying on the ground. Its relaxed demeanor seemed to put his groupmates more at ease, and they were looking less like they were ready to reach for their weapons and more interested in inspecting the cat. Xander quickly made his way back to the carts before the group of merchants could start to think he was considering making a run for it without engraving the bars. He made his rounds of the carts, quickly engraving a couple of gathering arrays and strengthening runes onto each bar. He could easily have added more per bar, but he wasn't exactly feeling charitable towards their business. Soon he was done, and returned to his companions to find Fraze eagerly scratching Freya's chin as the cat rolled and squirmed on its back. Atrax and Graphus were still at a slightly safer distance, but had good-natured smiles on their faces. "Glad to see everyone getting along," Xander commented as he came closer. Freya paused her squirming for a moment to look at Xander, but quickly went back to it as she sensed no displeasure from him. It didn't hurt that Fraze had not stopped her enthusiastic scratching of the big cat's chin and cheeks. "So, you're bonded to the cat?" Atrax asked, slightly confused. "I'm pretty sure you didn't mention any animal bonding abilities, and it's not exactly a fit with any of your classes either. Remember that quest I got to rescue her? The reward was an animal bond. It gives me the ability to bond with one cat, and only cats, I guess, because it came from the goddess of cats, until one of us dies. That is a unique gift to be given. It's very rare for people to be able to achieve a skill that is not in line with their class. Even items that allow one to cast something outside of one's wheelhouse are considered uncommon at best," Atrax said thoughtfully. "Not much common about Godsmarked, from what I hear," quipped Graphus. "And Xander here sure seems to fit the mold in that regard. Sorry again about the delay. I hope it didn't put us back too far." Xander felt a little guilty about putting them behind schedule. It had taken him about an hour to do all the bars, plus the time he'd spent acquiring Freya. "Worry not. We aren't on much of a schedule. No one's waiting on us. And I don't think we would have made it to the next village before stopping for the night anyway, so camping out on the road was always the plan for tonight. Although, since you've evidently sold your horse, do you have any plans for keeping up with us?" Oops. Yeah, that was maybe not the smartest move. I'd kind of thought I'd be able to ride Freya here, but I guess I should maybe ask first since she's smarter than the average cat. If not, I guess I can keep up using Eternal March since we aren't exactly going much faster than a brisk walk anyways. Xander turned to the cat, who was still stretched out on the ground, despite no longer being under Fraze's ministrations. "Freya, would you be all right with letting me ride you while we travel? It might be a lot faster than having to wait on me to walk everywhere. I'm too short to be fast like you." Xander chuckled at his own joke. Freya's size really was just ludicrous. "I'll even make sure I make you a nice comfy saddle so I don't make you uncomfortable." Freya appeared to be lost in thought after Xander's question. He could see the gears turning behind the cat's eyes as it thought the request over, and could feel it through the bond too. While not really translated into words, the gist of it came across in the bond. While the idea of being ridden by any old stranger struck her as distasteful, she didn't mind so much allowing Xander to ride her, considering he had rescued her and traded his other riding animal in the process. But the saddle better be as comfortable as he says it will be. Freya gave a nod once she was done mulling the thought over. "Perfect!" Xander was excited. While owning and riding a horse in his armor had made him feel rather knightly, riding a horse-sized cat would make him feel like a magical knight. Which he sort of was, he realized, considering his mostly plate armor and ability to use skills. "Let's get this thing started then so we can get out of here." Xander began the somewhat trial-and-error process of creating a saddle for a cat. What he'd ended up with was similar in construction to a harness that a dog or a cat might have worn on Earth, with 2 loops being buckled around each front leg, and a larger singular sheet of leather looping around Freya's stomach area. He'd made the leather as smooth and supple as he could to prevent it from rubbing, and added quite a lot of padding under the saddle to help distribute his weight a little more for the cat. He even embossed runes of smoothness on the underside of the straps and saddle, going all out for the comfort of his new companion. Freya didn't seem to mind the contraption once it was put on. The combination of the light construction and the smoothness runes made the saddle feel as if it were hardly there. Xander's weight was hardly anything compared to what the cat would catch and carry in its natural habitat, so her movement was not much impeded by a rider. Xander hooked his feet into the stirrup-like straps he'd added near where his feet would hang and gripped onto the handles he'd built into the saddle. He'd doubted that Freya would appreciate something like a bridle or reins. Considering she was intelligent enough to respond to verbal commands, Xander figured that she wouldn't need all that much direction, and if she did, he could just ask her to do what he needed. He still had a firm grip on the handles, though. He was certain that the cat could sling him from the saddle if it decided to. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.